Good. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Our topic today is going to be going over two new features from the version 68 release that happened just 2 weeks ago. The two features we're going to be going over today are the action button and the new layout and controls for data exports. Before we get into the topic, let's go ahead and go over a little bit of housekeeping. So all of your microphones are currently muted. We ask that you keep them that way during the webinar. If you have any questions, please put them in the Zoom chat window. Our teammate and director of education, Sam, is in the chat, and she will be helping to answer questions throughout the webinar, and anything that needs to be kind of answered or gone over again at the end. We'll have a bit of a Q&A where we'll go over the questions from the chat. This webinar is also being recorded and will be put up on our YouTube channel in a couple days. You can always find our YouTube channel by going to YouTube and searching clubexpress.com. That's with the dot spelled out. So that's ClubExpress, DOTCOM. You can also find our YouTube channel linked to in our support section of the control panel. I'll point to that in just a little bit. While you're on our YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe. That'll let you stay up to date with all of the feature announcements and webinars that we post, along with all of our new training videos that we post about all of our features. And as we get our video content updated, you'll see that pop up there as well. To get a look at our upcoming webinars and new feature announcements and things like that, you can go to clubexpress.com and click on that calendar button. And while you're looking at our calendar, if you see a webinar that you're interested in, you can go ahead and register. It's not just to, let us know who's attending. It's also going to give you the opportunity to submit questions. So if there's a topic that's upcoming and there's something specific that you want to see, you can enter that as a part of registering for that webinar, and you can enter those questions, and we'll make sure to include that information in our session. The last thing before we get started is we love to hear reviews from our members and our users. So if you have any opinions, please head over to clubexpress.com/reviews, and you can leave us a review there. We love to hear from people, and it also really helps people who are considering ClubExpress. It helps them decide if ClubExpress is the right software for them. All right, so let's get into what our topic is going to be today. We are going over first the action button. We're going to do kind of a quick refresher on how the filter tool works for the People Manager, because the action button specifically takes advantage of the way the People Manager filters. So we can add and create complex filters in the People Manager and then use the results of that filter to create all sorts of interesting things with the new action buttons. We can add people to mailing lists. We can create new mailing lists. We can add people to committees, interests, or even subgroups if you're an organization that uses the subgroup function. The last thing you can do with the action button is also export those results. It's going to give you a CSV or Excel file that will have all of the kind of contact info, phone numbers, email address, address of all of the people that you found in your People Manager search results. So that's what the action button will be going over in just a minute. And then we'll also take a look at our data exports. So we've kind of changed the way the data exports is laid out. We didn't really change much of the functionality, but we really changed the way that you interact with the data exports. And we are also in the process of moving some of our CSV reports from the reports section in the various parts of the control panel and kind of pulling them all together so that all of the CSV style exports will eventually live in that data exports page. We're also going to talk very briefly about how you can request new exports. So we're very interested in kind of growing our data exports page into something that's a lot more of a resource. It used to be kind of, if you were just, one of the website admins that would go there just to pull big bulk data exports, but we really want it to become a very user-friendly and also kind of like powerful resource for our administrators. So we're looking for input from people about what kind of things they would like to see data exports made. So, what you see there isn't the end of what the data exports page will be. We want it to grow over time. So getting into our demonstration, the first thing we're going to go over is kind of a look back over the People Manager. We've done training videos and webinars about the People Manager before, but we're really going to hone in on the filtering tools, because those filtering tools really play into the way the action button works. So we're going to look at how we can filter for both members and non-members. We are going to look at the different types of filter values that we have. We're also going to take a look at how to add and remove filters to narrow and kind of broaden our search results. And then we'll talk about why the default search is the way it is. So a lot of you have probably logged into the website and noticed there is a very specific search every time you log in as kind of a starting place. And so we'll talk about that as well. We'll go over a couple of the member management tools, but we're really going to focus on the filter part. But while we're in the people manager, I might as well give a short refresher on what you can do with a member while you're there. So I'm going to hop over and switch to my demo club real quick. So give me just a second to change my screen. All right, so you should be able to see the demo club. Right now I'm on the Northwest Balloon Club. This is one of our kind of test websites. And we're going to take a look at the people manager. So right now I'm on the homepage and I'm logged in as an administrator, Martin Smith. He's kind of our catch-all administrator for all of our demo clubs. And because he's a full administrator, he has access to the control panel. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the control panel and click right in there. And that's going to land us in the control panel, and we're going to head straight to the people tab. The people tab of the control panel is going to be almost all the way to the left. I will take this moment as a reminder, this has been a growing pain for me as well. We have added a new tab to the control panel. We had a webinar on it last week, the dashboard tab. So a lot of you may have that muscle memory to go, oh, the people is all the way on the left. It'll take you a couple days to adjust to. The people tab is now the second to the left right here for people. This dashboard where we can get an at a glance look at all the kind of how our organization is doing is now the leftmost section of the control panel. It is still pretty easy to get to the people tab. The first time you log in for a login session, the control panel is going to take you straight to the people tab. So those of you who are used to clicking the control panel when you log in and being on the people tab already, that will still be the case. It's not going to take you to the dashboard. It's going to take you to the people tab first, just like it did before. So let's go ahead and head down to our admin function section, and the first thing we have here is the people manager. I love to mention, we here at ClubExpress, we don't always do everything alphabetically. We usually organize our things by what gets used the most. So if you've ever wondered why things are in the order they are, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's because we look at the data of who is using what features the most. And so we will order them. And because the people manager is easily the most used tool in ClubExpress, we put it front and center. So when we click on the people manager, it's going to take us into, my internet's running a little slow today. There we go. It's going to take us into our people manager page. And the tool we're going to be focusing in on today is this search box right here. So this is the box that's really going to matter for how we interact with our actions button. So when we land on our search box, we're going to see a default search that is plugged in for us already. If we just land on this page and just hit search, that's the search that's going to get executed. So the default search is always going to be searching for members. We do have the choice to change that to searching for non-members. And so those are people who can't log into the system. They aren't members in our organization, but we do store their contact info. So that's everyone who's, if a non-member has signed up for an event or filled out a survey or, just been manually added to the interested persons list, they're going to exist in our non-member database. And we can also choose to filter for both. So that's going to give us search results of both our members and our non-members. But the default is going to set us to members. The default search is also going to include two search criteria. It's going to search for member status and last name. We'll go over changing what criteria we're looking for in just a minute, but let's talk about what filters are filled in. So for member status, it's going to pre-select active and expired. The reason it pre-selects active and expired is because this is the most common search that we see in the people manager. There's a lot of other statuses you might search for, and a lot of people would assume, well, our default search should just be active members because we only really care about them. The reason we include expired in this default search is because we don't want to exclude a member that maybe expired yesterday and is planning to, maybe renew tomorrow. Sometimes it takes people a couple days to notice that their membership is expired and get back in there. And so if we're looking for all of the people who are not just status active, but, active and engaging members of our website, occasionally those people will be expired. And so we don't want to necessarily exclude them from our default search. The rest of these statuses are a little bit more, niche, and so we don't really include them in the default search. We've got the drop status, which is kind of the ClubExpress version of deleted. We don't really delete data very often. The reason for that is because whenever we delete data, oftentimes we get a call and people will say, hey, I deleted something, but I need it back. So instead, what we do is we drop that data. A member in the dropped status, they won't receive emails, they won't receive text, they can't log in. They are effectively removed from the system. The only reason we still keep them around is for data retention so that you can go back and look at your dropped members. So they're not going to get communications. They're not going to interact with the website in any way, but you can still have them in your database. The other criteria here under member status is going to be frozen. So this status is just like the drop status. So they're not going to be able to log in. They're not going to be able to, get emails or text messages. They function just like dropped, but the intent of frozen is to be kind of like a limbo, put someone in purgatory so we can kind of hold on to them temporarily. So if someone were to break a rule or need to go on sabbatical from the organization, we can put them in frozen and they kind of get, in a hold pattern and we can review them. So in the case of someone who broke some sort of like club rule, we can put them in frozen and decide what to do with them later at our next board meeting and say, hey, slap on the wrist, you're allowed to be active again, and then we can unfreeze them if we want to. The next status down here is bulk loaded. A lot of you will have had experience with bulk loading. Bulk load is what you do with ClubExpress the first time you join our software. So you have, a group of members that you're pulling from a different place and you're uploading them into ClubExpress. We will bulk load them. Once you've done that, you really won't use bulk load again. So you won't need to worry about that. These next two are very similar kind of statuses. You can use perspective whenever someone is joining your organization. If your organization requires approval, they're going to exist in the perspective status. So that is where people will be, is if they are waiting for approval. Once they are approved, they will then go to active. The only reason they wouldn't go to active is if your organization also requires a fee. So a lot of you do require, membership dues to be a part of your organization. If someone joins your organization, whether you require approval or not, if there's a fee, before they get to active, they will be in this new payment pending status. So the really functional part of that term is new. So this is only for new members that have not paid yet. So the payment for their first round of dues is pending. And so they're not actually active yet because they haven't paid. Once they do pay, they will go from this new payment pending back into the active status. And then once someone reaches that active status, they'll just bounce back and forth between active and expired unless an administrator moves them to a different status. The last status on this list is trial, and that is one that is pretty rarely used. Some of our organizations allow for trial memberships. You can set that up in your member types. You can designate a certain member type as trial, and they just exist kind of like an active member, but very slightly different with a little bit less access. So that's the status search. Again, the active and expired statuses are the ones that are selected by default, but you can always change this or even change it to check all if you want to get all of the results from your entire database. The next field that's included in our default search is last name. People are always searching by last name, but you don't have to put anything in here. If we leave this alone, so this is our standard default search, and we just go over here and hit search, even though last name is blank, it's going to give us all of our results. So this is not filtering by anything. If I'm only looking for someone with the last name of, say, Smith, we can come in here and just put an S or an SM. We don't have to type the entire thing out. And this is going to show me all of my people with last names that start with SM. And I can see there's all of my Smiths just by hitting search over here. So that's the default search. It's going to be members, active and expired, no filter on last name, but the field is there for you to type in. And then all you need to do to hit that default search is just hit search. And we'll see we have 43 people as a part of our search results there. So a note about our default search, if at any time you are working on a filter and let's say you've checked off a bunch of things and you've typed in a long last name and we need to reset this and we say, oh, I don't want to have to go through and delete this and go set it back. You can always just hit reset. And hitting reset will set us back to our default search, and then we can hit search again to rerun that default search. So reset will always take us back to this default search. You always have a jumping off point for that. So what if we're looking for, different criteria? What if we want more advanced information or something other than last name? Both of these fields, both member status and last name, are changeable. So we can say, I'm actually not interested in last name. If we click on last name here, you'll see there's this little arrow drop down. We can change this to any kind of criteria we're interested in that is stored for our member. So we can go and look at things like first name, username, their address. One that I see used a lot is something like city, state, or zip code. So if you have like a national organization, you say, I want to, go pull all of my Tennessee members, you can search by state. If you want to look for people in a certain zip code, you have a message you want to send or information you want to pull about people in a certain area, you can do that as well. Another one you can do is member area. That's going to, or metro area. That's going to be a tool that a lot of our aging in place villages use. Or for our organizations that have chapters, you can filter this down by subgroup as well. So you can go and check out, which people are in which subgroup. And then there's things like member type. Three of my favorites, a lot of these will be kind of self-explanatory, but three of my favorites are these bottom three down here. I always tell people, don't neglect these last three at the bottom. I love this recent addition tool. I use it quite a bit to check and see, who's joined my organization recently. So if we use recent addition, it gives us this option to look at, who has joined my organization in the last 30, 60, or 90 days. We also have the option for checking and seeing who's in our renewal cycle. So when it says is in renewal cycle, that means have these people received renewal notices from ClubExpress? And if they have they renewed yet? So if they haven't renewed yet, they would still be in the renewal cycle. And this will let us know all of the people that still need to renew their membership. If a member is renewed and in good standing, then they won't show up as a part of that result. And then my personal favorite, the very, very bottom, is with pending payment. This lets me get just a yes or no. Do these people owe me money? So that's a really quick way to go in and say, hey, these are people who have outstanding payments, and I can get a quick list and I can do whatever I want with that quick list. It's really, really useful. And again, once we're done, selecting what search we're looking for, we can hit search. Here's all of my people that currently, owe the organization money. And I can see that $ icon there as a part of my results, letting me know, hey, I can click on this $ to go submit a payment for these people. But if I'm done with this search and I need to get back to the default once again, I can click reset and search. And now I'm back to that default search results with 43 results. If I want to get even more specific, let's say I want multiple, filter criteria, there's a button over here on the right-hand side where I can add layers of filters, and I can get really, really complex with this. I can say, I want people with a certain last name who owe me money and are in their renewal cycle. I can set a whole bunch of different filters and really narrow this down to a small list of people if I want to get complex with it. I can also, once I get to a certain level of complex, if I want to walk that back a little bit, these little X buttons over here on the right-hand side can remove those filter criterias. So that's kind of how we change what we're searching for. That's how we change, where we are, who we are looking for in our search results. So once again, we can add filters here, and resetting here is also going to set us back to that default search I was talking about before. So I hit reset, it takes us back to this default search, and I just hit search again to run those results. So once we have those results, the question is, what do we do with this? So now we've got a search result of 43 people, and these are all of our active and expired members on this website. Once we look at these results, there's a number of things we can do. We already have a webinar that goes through each and every icon here. I'm going to focus in on a couple of the key features that are going to play into the action button. So one thing we can do is we can go in here and we can click on a person's status. So in this membership column, this is where we can go in and make changes to a member status. So if someone is active and we need to freeze them because they broke a rule, or drop them because they've left the organization permanently, or for some reason, this is one that doesn't get used a whole lot, but you can manually set someone from active to expired. Let's say, for one reason or another, we marked them as active, but they were actually supposed to be expired. We can set them back to that expired status. So that's where we can click to make their status changes. And then two icons that I'm going to point out today, the pencil. This is always an important one. This will take us into this member's profile, and we can make changes to the information about that member. And another one we'll talk about today is this second icon over. This is our mailing list category. So now I'm going to transition into talking about mailing lists. So here is a list of all of our mailing lists that we have on our system. And before I get into detail on what we do to change this, let's hop over to the communication section of our control panel. We'll be coming back to this page in just a minute to talk about our actions button, but I'm going to take a quick leap over to our control panel again and head to communications. And this is where our mailing lists are stored. So in communications under setup, we're going to find our mailing list categories. Now, any of you who are using ClubExpress will have a number of mailing lists from day one. And you can tell which ones are the built-in mailing list because they will say system on them. So we'll see system, system, system. And then the ones that have a pencil or a trash can icon, those are ones that have been made manually by your organization. The reason we have so many system mailing lists is because anytime someone interacts in a certain way with your website, we, ClubExpress, will automatically add them to a mailing list. So a really great example is this event registrants mailing list. Whenever you've been setting up an event, you've probably seen that you have an option that says mailing lists, and the default is event registrants. I usually recommend just leaving that alone. The reason for that is that way I have a really easy to maintain list of everyone who has signed up for any events. So at any point in time, if I'm using our emailing tool, I can just say, hey, target all of my members that are on the event registrants list. And that way I send a really quick email out to everyone who has attended any event on my website. Similarly, I can also send an email out to all non-members. So this mailing list tool, this isn't just for members. This is also for non-members. And so this is going to let me target non-members as well. And I can say, I want to send an email to all of my non-member event registrants, letting them know, hey, here's a discount coupon for membership. You've attended our events in the past, so we're really interested in having you be a part of our organization. So here's a discount coupon, and you can check out our webinar on discount coupons for how to set that up. And you can give them, half off or 25% off on membership. So it's a really great way to stay in contact with people who are interacting with your website. Similarly, we also have one for donations. So you can reach out to people who've donated before, because once someone donates, they're likely to donate again. So you can reach out if you have a certain fund that you're trying to raise money for. You can say, hey, we know you donated in the past. We really appreciate it if you want to help us out with a certain fund. So there's all sorts of system tracking mailing list categories that are automatically maintained. But there are mailing list categories that you can create yourself. So we can hit this add category button and we can create our own categories that we can use for our own purposes. So whenever we're hosting an event, if we wanted to point people to a certain mailing list, or one that I like to do, if we're making an ad hoc form, we can create and have that ad hoc form point at a very specific mailing list. So if we create a form for people to say, hey, I'm interested in getting, t-shirts at this year's picnic, fill in your t-shirt size, I can have that. I can create a mailing list category called, t-shirt user, t-shirt members. And then I can send an email to everyone interested in t-shirts asking for more information, or, send out more emails about what color of t-shirt they would like, things like that. You can use this tool for whatever reason you want. It's just a way to categorize people who are interested in kind of interacting with your website. So this is how you kind of go and create those mailing lists, but what do we do with them once we have them, and how do we add people to these mailing lists, especially the non-system ones? If we have a handful of people we want to add to a mailing list, how do we get them on there? So one way that you can get them on there now, if we go back to our people manager again, let's say we're looking for all of our people that have a last name Smith like we did before. Right now, these are all of our members with the last name Smith that are active or expired. And we get a list of 4 people. If I want to create a list for all of my Smiths, we can now click this action button, and we're going to get a list of actions we can take with our search results. And the first 2 options on this actions dropdown have to do with mailing lists. So the first option is to create a new mailing list. So instead of going to our mailing list page, hitting create new mailing list, and then going back here to add them to that mailing list, and this is that button I was talking about before where you could individually add one person to one mailing list. Instead, we have this option to say, create a new mailing list for these results. And so this is going to make a new mailing list and put everyone in this search result into it. So I've got 4 search results here, and I can choose actions, and I'm going to say these are the Smiths. and I'll hit save. And it doesn't look like anything happened because there's no changes visibly here. But now if we go back to our mailing list page, we go back to communications and back to our mailing lists. If we scroll down, there's that mailing list I just created. So now there's the Smiths, and we'll see in this column of entries how many people are on that mailing list. There's 4 people because there were 4 people in those search results. So it created the list for me and added those search results for me. So whatever criteria you want to search for in your control panel, in your people manager, whatever criteria you want to search for, you can create a list and start that list off with whatever search result you have there. If we reset, we can also choose to add additional people. So let's say we also want to add our non-members. So we only added member Smiths, but if we say, actually, we want to reach out to everyone named Smith, and we want to, have a little Smith party. So now let's search for Smith, but instead we're searching for non-members. So now there's 3 people that are called Smith, three results with the Smith name under our search results for non-members, and we also want them on that list. Under my actions, I wouldn't want to create a new list because then I would have 2 lists with the name Smith. I actually just want one list with all of my members and non-members with the last name Smith. I can use this second option that says add to existing mailing list. And so I can choose this option. It's going to say people to add 3. That's how many people I'm adding to the list because there's 3 results. And then I can go down here and there's that Smiths option that I just created a moment ago. And I can say add people. And so now these 3 people who are non-members are also added to that list. And once again, if we hop over to our communication section and take a look at our mailing list category, now on our Smiths option, we have 7 because we added 3 more. So those are the first 2 options when we're looking at the actions button. That's what we can do with our results. There are other options we can do. So 2 that are very similar. If you have committees, so if we were to have, a Smiths committee or a committee of people with birthdays in August or whatever committee we want to that we can fit with this search criteria, we can add to a committee as well. So we could say, if we want to switch this back to members, we can add members to a committee. It is important to keep in mind, both members and non-members can be on a committee. So you are able to put people on committee lists. Now, obviously, non-members can't log in, and so there will be limited access, but you can have a non-member listed on a committee. So when you are doing these search results and you are adding someone to a committee, it's going to include non-members in your search results. So you want to make sure that if you're only looking for members, you want your search results to be members only for a committee. Now, inversely, with interests are only available to members. So interests are a little bit more open. Members are able to add and remove themselves from interests at will, whereas committees, you might have the committee set up to be, admin only control. But with interests, there is not a way for non-members to be marked as being quote unquote interested in a particular interest. So you can, add a group of people based on these criteria that we set up here to, interested in morning bike rides if we have some sort of criteria that meets that. So both of these tools just add people to groups of people, categorizations of people in that way. The next option, this is one that a lot of you may not see this in your control panel. So there are a number of organizations with ClubExpress that are what we call chaptered organizations. And so they might have subgroups as a part of their website. If you're not sure if that meets your criteria, if you don't see it here, then that's not you. Also in your control panel under the club tab, if you don't see the subgroup manager module, then that also means that you don't have subgroups. So those of you who have subgroups probably know who you are. You can add groups of people to a subgroup. So I could add all 4 of these results to a particular subgroup. And when I click that, it's going to say I'm adding 4 people. And here's my little subgroup collector. And I can say, I want to add all 4 of these people to the Western Illinois subgroup. A quick note about when you are adding someone to a particular subgroup. A lot of organizations will have fees associated with subgroups. So if we are joining, again, let's say the Chicago Metro subgroup, if it costs $10 for a member to join the Chicago Metro subgroup, this is going to bypass that. This will not create fees for that member. So keep in mind when you're using this, if you want those fees to be charged to a member, you want to do it manually member by member. There's not a bulk way to add people and charge them for being added to that subgroup. So also keep that in mind. Another note about when you are adding people to a subgroup is that their membership type needs to allow them to be a part of a subgroup. If their membership type does not let them have subgroups, then it's not going to function when that process tries to run for that member. It's just going to kind of fizzle out. It's not going to go through with that process. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure that the search criteria you're looking for meets membership types that allow members to be added to subgroups. It's not going to work for anyone who has any sort of limited subgroup selection options. The last option, and this is my personal favorite from my actions, this is one, especially with the things like, with pending payment, if we want to just go and see the results, these are all of the people that owe me money. If I want to send them, paper mail, and I want a quick look at all of their addresses, I can just search for people with a pending payment, go over to actions and hit export this list to CSV. When I do so, it's going to download that file. And we can take a quick look. I'll pull up that file and we'll take a quick look and see what that looks like. That's loading on my computer for just a second. Let's see if that will open. There we go. So let me change my screen share and I'll show you what the export for this tool looks like. So this is the Excel export that we just ran. And we can see there's all those members from our search results. Let me zoom in on this just a little bit. We can see we get things like member number, their last name, first name, all the things up to phone number and email address. And you'll notice that some of these kind of rows are not full spaced. You can easily just highlight the entire section and double click on a row header to space that out. The reason it doesn't come in formatted at all is because this is a CSV. We prioritize exporting this as a CSV because it's a lot easier for Excel to sort. So if you wanted to pull this in and merge it with another spreadsheet, this data is just raw data. There's no formatting, no color codes or anything like that. It's just the raw information. And you can take this and do whatever you want with this information. So you can, go in and sort and filter and change information and hold this, and you can use this to reach out to those people. So in this specific example, all of these people have pending charges, and I get their information, I get their phone numbers and their email addresses, and I can reach out to them or send them, paper mail if I want to. So let me swap back to my other share. So that is the actions button. So I'll go ahead and take a note. I keep the Zoom chat open on the other window. I've seen a lot of questions about how we can improve this. This is a new function, and it is a function that we plan to expand on. So if there are any, ideas about different functions that we can add, if there's something you want to do on this list that's not showing up, if you want to add them to, some sort of different part of your website that you think we could interact with, or if there's information that you want to be in that export, go ahead and send that over to ideas@clubexpress.com. We are actively looking on to expand this, to make this action button even more powerful. This is just our first pass at, kind of what we can do with the search results. So this is not a finished product. This is just, version 1.0, and we'll be coming out with even more improvements to the action button as time goes on. So that's our action button. This is what we can do with our, with a new function of the people manager. The people manager was already kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of people, and now it's just got even more functionality with what we can do with those search results. Let's kind of change paces and go and talk about a slightly different function. Let's go over to our control panel again, and let's head to the organization tab. It's gonna take a second because my internet is being a little slow today. There we go. So we're going to go to the club tab. For a lot of you, this club tab might be named something. It could be called organization or association or league. Just know that it is the tab in between money and communication. So that's what we're talking about here, is this club tab. So depending on what you call your organization, this might show up as a different name. So when we head over to the club tab, there is a function under admin functions called data export. Now, this tool has been there for a long, long time, as long as I've worked at ClubExpress. If you want to export your data in kind of a bulk way, this is one of the best places to do it. But we've recently kind of revamped the way the page looks and works. It used to just be a tall page of a bunch of checkboxes, and you could just, pick which report you want to run and hit go. We recently added, a few years ago, we added a date range option, but now we've kind of truncated this page. So it used to be all of these reports would show up immediately, and you would just have to pick from this long list. But instead, we've kind of decided to organize it the same way we organize our control panel. So you'll see here's our people reports, just like the people tab of the control panel. There's our money exports, just like the money tab of the control panel, and so on and so forth. So we are looking to, kind of reorganize the way our data exports exist. And you'll notice, depending on what I select here, if I select this first report, I get an option to fill in a date range and an option to select a subgroup. So now, depending on which exports I click on, if I go and I look at my communications export and I click on bad member email addresses, you'll notice that date range goes away, because we don't filter our, bad email addresses by date, because we don't have any sort of date information. It's just whether or not an email is bad in a given moment. And so the date goes away. So the selections that we get here are kind of staged. First, we take step one. We go find what report, what export we want to pull. So we can say, let's go and pull our, club's financial transactions. I want to see all the fees that we've paid to ClubExpress. So that's step one. Step two is going to be whatever the next step is in order to pull that report. So step two will actually change depending on which export we select. So for the club financial transactions, step two is to select a date range. So this is going to be all of my club's financial transactions between, my club and ClubExpress in a selected date range. And that's all I need to fill in for this export. I would just say, between the beginning of this month and today, those are the two dates that I've selected, and I would hit export down here, and it would generate another CSV export for me. I can go ahead and hit export, and it will create a download for me. The next thing I need to do, that's all I need to do for that report. But if I wanted to run more exports, all I need to do is go back to step one and say, I actually want this, chapter membership history. It's going to ask for step two being a date range, and then step three is going to be a subgroup selection. So for you, again, once again, the organizations that have subgroups, you probably know who you are. If you have subgroups, this will pop up for you, and you can select to run this export just for a particular subgroup. So we can say, I only want, everyone that falls under the purview of Illinois. This is just going to give me my membership history for Illinois. But if I select, the entire club, it's going to give me the membership history for my entire organization, and so on and so forth. A note about the way these exports work as well. If you are a chapter admin, so if you're an admin just for, say, the Chicago metro area, this will be pre-selected for you, and you can only run exports that pertain to your kind of section. So your data exports are going to be filtered to your kind of to your area automatically. Now, most of the exports here are the same exports that were there before. So you'll probably recognize, if you've used the data export page before, you'll recognize a lot of these exports. These were here before. We have added a few. So for example, the communications section and the club section, a lot of these used to be reports. So a lot of us are very used to going to the control panel. When we're on the control panel, hitting this reports button, and then choosing what report we want to run, and we can choose to run it, and we get to this page and we get a few options. So those of you who have run reports before, this will be familiar. Whenever you're running a report from the control panel, it lets you choose what format you want to export. We've known for a while now, and we've been working on getting it fixed, that there are certain reports where if you choose the CSV unformatted export type, it doesn't look great. Because it's using the same data that we would use for our PDF reports, but just forcing it into an unformatted CSV. And so it wasn't coming out great. So what we're doing, if you ever notice there's a report that's missing this CSV option, what that means is we've taken that report, we've reformatted its CSV version and put it in data exports. So for now, those are, things like our chapter membership history, our bad email exports. These are where those CSVs live now. And over time, any CSV exports that could be a little bit cleaner, we're going to take them, kind of do some work on them, clean them up, and begin to put them on this data export page, because we want this to be kind of a better one-stop shop for, the reports that you might need. So as time goes on, we'll be moving more and more reports here and kind of upgrading the way the reports work. And we're also going to be kind of expanding what reports are here. So this is another place, just like with the actions button, this isn't done. We aren't done with the data exports page. We plan for this to grow. And so I'm going to ask for your input one more time. I saw that Sam put the email address in the chat, ideas@clubexpress.com. Send us your ideas for what exports you think should live on this data exports page. If there's a particular type of report that your organization needs, and it's something that we can create for you, we would love to add it to the list of exports that live on this page. And we will be kind of like growing these lists as time goes on. And so, we really, really would love to hear from you about, what type of exports you think would be useful. That's my info. We didn't have, a ton to go over today. I know I'm wrapping up what I've got, but I did see the chat was pretty lively for a while there. So I'm sure there are things that Sam will need to, have said or have questions. Sam, what do we have going on in terms of questions?
Was it ever lively? Okay, so I'm trying to frantically scroll back to the top of the chat here. All right, so we'll kind of start with a few different things. There were some questions about things that we've touched on actually in recent webinars. So I want to quickly highlight those. So there were questions about maybe a full list of administrators. Is there a filter in the People Manager just to see administrators? No, but there's a report. So if you go to our YouTube channel and check out our recent webinar website and data privacy, website and member privacy, you'll be able to kind of browse the ways that you can, and Devin's showing it now, that you can run a report to see all of your administrators, coordinators, subgroup admins, subgroup coordinators, the whole deal. So you have a way to get that information out. It's not something that's in the People Manager. The People Manager is really primarily to deal with members and non-members, not so much your administrators. There were questions about managing non-member data, so maybe removing non-members. We certainly, we have tools to do that. In the People Manager, we do have non-member data cleanup tools. And if you search our YouTube channel for non-members, I believe I also linked the video in the chat. We do have a full webinar dedicated to non-member cleanup tools. And that, just to sort of highlight that, it doesn't just clean up non-member data. That's also the same area that you visit when you are looking to merge non-member records with member records. For those of you who have members who maybe don't sign in and sign up for an event and end up in your non-member list. So take a peek at that video also. And there were some questions about status. So when someone is joining your organization, they have a new payment pending. Once they make that payment, do they automatically become an active member? Yes, they do. So as soon as they submit their payment, or as soon as an administrator applies a payment, that's the minute that their membership becomes active automatically, without any extra intervention from you as an admin. Remember, that prospective application process happens before payment. So they are a prospective member until you approve them. Then that payment happens, then they're active. So it's really that sort of 4-step process. There was a question about the reset button in the People Manager. So it is not a reset button for your database. All it does is reset your search filters. So Devin's kind of adding a hodgepodge of filters here and changing the filters, adding those in. So once you've got that, you go ahead and hit that reset button, and it resets your People Manager search to the default. This is the same default that you see when you pop into the People Manager every time. A search for members with a status of active and expired, sorted by last name. And that generally gives you the good idea of who's in your database. So that's your default search. That reset button resets that search for you. And we did talk about, Devin talked about one of his favorite filters, that recent edition filter. That was something that came up in our chat as well. It's a great way to see all of your new members, and you do get to choose the time frame that you search for those new members in. So if that's something that you want to use to say, hey, I want to take a minute every month to send out all of my new members a really, really nice welcome email, that's the way you do that. And scrolling through some things here. Another thing to point out, the search filter categories is your mailing list category search. So there were a couple of questions. Mailing list category is a little too long to fit in that search filter dropdown. So your category is a list of your mailing list categories. And there's that Smith's category that Devin added earlier. Question about what happens if a member was already on a mailing list that you just then added them to, maybe a second time. Well, the good news is they don't get added twice. So they're only going to be on that list once. If you select add to a mailing list that they're already added to, nothing happens. It doesn't remove them from the list. And it also doesn't send them any communications twice. So something that we have mentioned in a lot of webinars when we talk about emails, your members aren't going to get communications twice. They're not going to end up on a list twice. So that's not something that you have to worry about. And another thing that came up a couple of different times is there are some people who are working with mailing lists and maybe reusing those mailing lists, but potentially having to reset it. So, removing members and non-members from a list every month or quarter to start with a fresh list. And I want to stop and say, you don't have to do that. You can set up as many mailing list categories as you need. So for example, if you want to have an annual event mailing list category where every year you really are only concerned about who's gone to the events that year, you can set up individual categories for lots of different things. We definitely have a webinar and a tutorial covering our mailing list categories. And there are so many applications for mailing list categories and so many different ways that you can use them. You can kind of think about them as the communications version of our financial accounts. They are a great little power horse for you to create segments of people within your organization. And again, as Devin is showing, as you can probably see on a lot of our demo sites, there is not a limit to the categories that you can set up. You aren't limited to just the system categories. Yes, we have one event registrants category, but that doesn't mean that you can't set up additional categories. So we highly encourage you to visit those tutorials and webinars and see how you might implement those items on your own site. And further, if you implement them in a fun way, or even just a way that you'd like to talk about, shoot us an email. You can send us an email, and we'd love to hear how you are using new features on your website, how they're helping you and your organization. We love to hear stories like that, and they help us determine, the kind of content that we share with people, what's the most useful to them. And going through a couple of additional points. One point that I would like to bring up, and I don't know if it came up in our time today, but when you add a member to a subgroup from the people manager using the action button, the subgroup fees are not included in that. So when you're adding a member to a subgroup as an admin, it isn't the same as a member joining that subgroup on their own. So if there is an approval process that subgroup admin needs to go through, remember that as a parent level admin, you've sort of skipped over that process. And then also keep in mind that when you are adding members to a subgroup, they will not see that fee come up for them. So that kind of action, when you're thinking about adding lots of people to a subgroup, you certainly have the framework within your site to make that automatic or make that subgroup selection something that they can choose. So kind of think about that process when you're using that action item.
I will jump on that and say there are some organizations that only charge the chapter fees when someone renews, and they don't charge for joining. If that's the case, then that would be, that wouldn't really apply to you. Because if you add someone to a mailing list this way, when they renew, if that chapter charges renewal fees, those will still get paid. So it's not like just adding them this way means they never pay chapter fees. It's just that process of adding them doesn't incur those fees if that's something you charge. So you don't need to worry about them like never getting charged for the chapter. It just means that they won't get charged the moment you click on that. So the next time their membership renews, if they're still in that chapter, and if that chapter charges renewal fees, those fees will be incurred.
Great point. Thank you for the clarification. And to reiterate, our mailing address for all of your ideas is ideas@clubexpress.com. Remember that we've mentioned it in a few of our emails to admins over the last month or so, that we are going to be moving away from CSV reports and moving toward data exports, which come in the same format and have a little more functionality. They're cleaner. We have a lot of those exports built in already, but keep in mind that some of those financial reports that you might be looking to run may not be included in those exports. We want to hear from you. What are the exports you're interested in seeing? What reports are you interested in seeing? What data are you interested in seeing? So make sure that you send all of those ideas to ideas@clubexpress.com. When you send an email to a mailing list that you created, will people receiving the email be able to see everyone in the mailing list? No, they will not. So that just comes through as an email to that regular person. They only see their name. They see your club's name. They aren't going to see everyone else on that mailing list. Now, if that's something that you want, and you want people to be able to, let's say, reply to everyone and converse that way, we'd suggest that you maybe explore some of the other communication tools built into the site. So as a built-in module, you can certainly use discussion forums and use that as a way to get a virtual conversation going. You can also, if you're a mobile app user, you're using the ClubExpress mobile app, you can certainly set up channels for communication, direct messages, and use the chat feature. So of course, we have webinars talking about our mobile app, and we also have webinars talking about discussion forums. So we have a couple of different ways that you can do that. And some other questions that came through towards the end here. Are you able to do your own data imports? So the only thing that you're able to import into your website on your own would be a list of non-members. So when you're taking a look at your options for importing data, you're not usually importing member data, right? You're importing member data right at the start, and we're handling that for you. And then as time goes on, you potentially are importing additional non-member mailing lists. So you aren't able to import anything else, event registrants or anything for an event. That's usually all done on your site. And lots of questions. This is great. So
I did see someone asked, is there a way to delete mailing lists? There is. So if you get full on mailing lists, we are working on improving the mailing list tool. It hasn't been in full speed development just yet, but improvements to the mailing list is something that is kind of like it's coming up in the pipeline. But if we go look at our mailing list right now, so for example, let's see if there's one that's pretty easy. So here's one that I set up a while ago just as a test. So we'll say Devin's list. Right now, I can't delete Devin's list. There's no trash can, but there's only one person on this list that I made. If we hop over to our people manager and we search for people in that category. So let's go to category and we're looking for Devin's list and we search. We'll see that's the one person in Devin's list, and we can go over to this mailing list and say, let's take you out of that list. If there are 0 people in a mailing list, so we see Devin's list 0. If that number is 0 and it is not a system mailing list, we can delete it. So we can say, hey, I no longer need Devin's list. I can remove it. Now, that brings up another question, and this is something we're working on. There's not a really easy way at the moment to say, hey, empty this mailing list. So that's one of those things that we are kind of working towards. We don't have a system for, wiping out all of the people on a particular mailing list at the moment, but I believe that is something that's in the pipeline. I just have no timeline for that, but it's something that's on our minds. So yeah, there is a way to delete mailing lists. Unfortunately, it's somewhat manual. You have to go in and take the people out of that mailing list. And there's also not a something that I have kind of mentioned that might be useful would be to do a remove from mailing lists. And we could do that through the action button. So that could be a kind of tool of the action button, just like with add to mailing list, we could do a remove from mailing list as well. And something I always kind of point out to people as well is whenever you're doing bulk actions like this, so whenever you're saying, hey, I've got a group of 20, 30, 40 some odd people and I'm going to take an action with, always take a moment before you hit the button go. Take a moment to make sure that what you're doing is, exactly what you want. Because just as I've mentioned, if we accidentally add people to the wrong mailing list, then I've got 43 people, at the moment I would have to go one by one and take them out of, the mailing list. So we aren't there to the bulk remove yet. So bulk adding people, incorrectly could cause, 15, 20 minutes of, manual labor to undo that. Not the end of the world, to do 43 people, but especially if you're one of our bigger organizations with, 1,000 members and you accidentally add 1,000 people to a mailing list, suddenly you've got a bigger problem. So anytime you're doing sort of like a bulk action, take a second and make sure that you're being very meticulous about what you're doing.
And a couple, you're also, we're both going through questions now. The format the data exports are in, that's a CSV file. So that's going to be an unformatted Excel spreadsheet. Everything's going to be in columns. It's extremely easy to work with an Excel, filtering, sorting, adding your own spin on things. So it's a great file to work with. There was another question, or not really a question, but a point that came through that we are going to pass on to our developers. Right now, you have the ability to say that I want to give someone access to a specific report or report category as opposed to all reports. And so we're certainly going to talk with our team to see how that might be mimicked with with some of those reports getting moved exclusively into data exports. So we'll certainly make sure that we address those kinds of things in our dev process.
Yeah. And I believe, so I know this is the way it works for subgroup admins at the very least. I don't know if this ties into coordinators. So as we talked about last week, the way our dashboard works, if you are a coordinator, the dashboard will show up for everyone, no matter what your access is, but what dashboard options you have available to you are based on your level of access. So if you have access to, the financials, then you can see the money reports. But if you don't have access to control members, you may not see the membership reports. I believe the intent, I'll have to double check with this, so don't quote me too hard on this, but I'm pretty sure the same functionality is the intent for data exports, is that, everyone will have access to data exports if you are any level of administrator, but what you have access to on this page will be determined by your level of access. So I know that already functions for subgroup admins, but coordinators is one that I'm actually not sure if that functionality is there yet. So, but at the very least for subgroup admins, if you're an admin of the Illinois subgroup, you'll only be able to run data exports that apply to your Illinois subgroup. So that limitation is already there.
And a couple of other questions about the different types of reports and where report data might be listed. We have a lot of different reports and data exports, and they all include lots of different pieces of information. So it certainly can be difficult to find the report that you need. A lot of them have the same information, but just one or two fields that are different. So we do encourage you, there isn't a cost to hitting that report button as many times as you want. So we do encourage you to run reports, see what filters are there for you. And it'll also give you the opportunity to take a look at the reports that you like and determine if those are reports you'd like to see added to that data export option as well.
Yeah, and I'll jump on that as well and say, whenever you're running reports, so not necessarily just the data exports, obviously the data exports are organized by the same layout as the control panel. So the people exports are under people, the money exports are under money. The same kind of applies to our control panel reports. So if we're looking for a report about our members, say, I want a report of all of my members, I can go over to the people tab, and that's where my members are going to be because my members are people. If I'm looking for a report about my website visits, like how many people are visiting my website, that's going to be in the website section. So we kind of try to organize the reports based on, what it relates to, being it, people, website, club, communications. And then the last note about that is additionally, I mentioned kind of up at the top that we put People Manager front and center because it's the most used. We follow a similar process with our reports. So we try to organize our reports by most used. So, the contact lists get used pretty heavily, and there's the membership directory. So a lot of people are always looking for membership directories. And so we put it front and center. This isn't an alphabetized list. Instead, we go by, the most run reports, what we see are the most useful reports. And then the more like kind of nuanced and niche ones might be further down by the bottom. This doesn't apply to everyone. Obviously, different people have different priorities, but we kind of take what we see and generalize it so that they are, so if you're looking for, a particular report, I usually recommend start at the top of the list, read what they're called. You'll probably find something close to what you're looking for in the top few reports there. Someone asked if there's a webinar on the new dashboard feature. That was our webinar last week. It is up on our YouTube channel. So again, if you go to youtube.com and you go and search for clubexpress.com, that's ClubExpress DOTCOM on YouTube, you'll find our channel, and our dashboard webinar is up on that YouTube channel. All right, we're a little bit past the hour, so I'll go ahead and wrap up. I know there's tons and tons of questions. We could hang out and answer questions for probably another hour. But we also have our support team. So if you have, questions about very specific functionalities, please feel free to reach out to our support team, support@clubexpress.com. And you can also send any ideas. So once again, I'll put the call out one more time for the army of ClubExpress admins. If there are any sort of dashboard reports that you'd be interested in seeing that aren't on the list, or any other functionalities for the action button to take advantage of, or any reports that you would like to see showing up in the data export page, kind of give us a call, let us know, send us an email. The best place to send that is ideas@clubexpress.com. We are actively looking for things to add to the action button, to the dashboard, and to our data exports page. So let us know kind of like what you want to see in those pages. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Those of you who are with us in Chicago, stay hydrated. It's 115 outside, so a rough day. So, stay safe out there, and have a great rest of your day.